Okay, we've gone through all our process of identification. We've gone through our collection process. We've gone through our preservation process, our chain of custody, obtaining our hashing, so make sure that there's integrity. We've gone through our analysis, so we've gone through and performed the analysis. And finally, now we've come to the very last steps that we hope during this investigation or digital forensics process. Now, the last kind of process here is all about our final debriefs and final verification. So the very first component that I want to sort of touch on here as I write out verifications is ensuring that everything has gone through our integrity checks. So typically we will take our hashes, during, the first phase, and we've gone through and we've actually validated that, at the final step, all hashes remain the same. There's no changes to the data, no changes to the systems, and we're going to validate that everything lines up correctly as it should. So should we've gone and copied all the evidence, we did an analysis on all this, everything is true, and everything remains to be valid, and the integrity of those systems is obviously true and correct. So verification is a super important step. We want to make sure that everything has its integrity. We've got evidence to back us up should we need to, continue the conversations further, which kind of move us into our presentation. And presentation is all about presenting our findings, right? And there's two kind of areas to this. One, we've got our alternate explanations. And this could be something like maybe someone was set up, maybe there was, they were framed to do something. There's an explanation behind what's happened, right? So what appears to be the scenario can be another sort of thing behind that. So therefore, we need to go away, analyze the data for the information, and ensure everything is accurate. We have to be really meticulous with our identification, obviously our analysis process. So again, there's multiple explanations to things. Alternate explanations could be an area that we're going to have to present based on the findings that we found. Now, the other area is actionable. Could be actionable items, or info. And these things could be things like, well, maybe now during our investigation process, we found not only was it one device communicating with something, now we've got a whole department, or maybe three or four assets that are communicating with something. So now with what we thought was something is now totally something else. So as we go through that process, we now have identified maybe five, six, or four devices that we've got here that have been communicating or doing that malicious activity. Um, Therefore, we now have to explain that and obviously prove, you know, as to why they're doing that. So hopefully we've got our proof, we've got our chain of custody, we've got our hashes, we've got all the evidence through our analysis phase, screenshots, documentation, processes. Now, I'll cover this when we do our presentation update. So this is our update down here, and I'll just talk about this in just a moment. But as we continue this, we've got to prove that this was actually, it did go through and is actually working, or disprove if this was anything that we disprove of anything that was not in that nature. So we've got to go away and validate that or not validate it if it wasn't an issue. So should someone in this example come to us and say, well, how do we know that it wasn't these other devices communicating? Well, then we've got factual evidence to say, well, this is why our reasons are, because based on our investigations and how we did this. And you've got your screenshots, your evidence, your documentation to prove that nothing like that was happening. So should anything like that happen, there's actionable items. Again, could be multiple systems or multiple people or other devices involved, such as maybe mobile phones or other systems could be performing those sort of attacks, or depending on what you're doing your analysis on, or what the goals are, like we mentioned before. So just to be mindful as we present, there's two kind of outcomes here. We've got our alternate explanations, which prove an alternate response to something, and then finally our actionable items or actionable information that could be additionally supplying information that we didn't know about originally. So they're the two items there. Now, finally, as we wrap up, the final component, and that's all about our updates. Now, this is probably one of the most critical pieces, as well as, this is obviously going back to all the hard work that we've done during our process. And the final update is all about running your updates to maybe the end user. So we need to know basically our audience at this stage. Now, it could be, just write this out, know our audience. And this could be the CEO. This could be legal. This could be, a lawyer. of such, right? Now, if we're going to have to do legal presentations, that's fine. That's one thing. Maybe we have to present the findings to a lawyer. That's another thing. Maybe we've got to handle or hand over the information to the technical team. So if we know that it's technical findings, obviously here we will have all our technical requirements, technical information, opposed to maybe our legal stuff, which will be totally maybe a little bit subjective to that difference in state. So all I can say is during this update process, and I've been involved with pretty much both of these phases. So I've had to communicate directly to the chairmen and the CEOs. I've got to work with the legal team and obviously the technical department, and obviously work with a bunch of lawyers as well throughout that process. Because as you're going through this phase, the documentation is one thing. So you're going to have maybe your 50-page document with your screenshots and your timestamps, and then your your use cases on how you found this evidence. But then you may have to run a demo with the CEO in an actual workshop scenario to say, well, this is how we found the evidence, and actually go through the screenshots and actually pull up your autopsy or pull up your tool sets and actually do that with them in an actual presentation format, because you may have to explain maybe metadata that you found within images. So depending on the appetite of the audience, or understanding who your audience is, there may be different ways that you have to relay this information back to them, or visually represent the information back to maybe the CEO or maybe the legal team. And then they can go away and maybe write that legal document, which you may not have to be a part of, but then you may have to QA it and obviously make sure that the technical requirements are very accurate and stuff like that. So understanding the report structure as well is one thing. Just like any other report, you have to go away, give the details, identify those space, identify those systems that were involved, identify the assets and the content and context of the audience as well, in which you're going to be supplying this information, is super critical as well. So that's just pretty much it in a nutshell when we talk about our verifications and final debriefs during our digital responses during our verification process in digital forensics. I hope you've enjoyed this video, as and always, see you all in the next video series. Bye for now.